When two nations with a $760 billion trade relationship suddenly find themselves at odds, the consequences are anything but ordinary. Canada, once the US's closest ally, became a target of tariffs that sent shockwaves through economies, markets, and businesses. But instead of retreating, Canada fought back, and the world was left stunned. This is a story of an escalating conflict between two nations, one built on deep ties, but now on the verge of economic war. For years, Canada and the United States shared an unshakable economic bond trading billions of dollars, operating as the world's longest undefended border and navigating the complexities of mutual cooperation. But in 2018, that relationship was shattered with one decision. President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on nearly all Canadian goods, instantly turning a historic partnership into a fierce battleground. Instead of yielding, Canada made a bold and unexpected move, retaliating in a way that nobody anticipated, shaking up businesses, consumers, and politicians alike. What followed wasn't just a trade dispute. It became a full-on clash of national identities, global ambitions, and economic futures. Now the question remains, can these two neighbors ever repair their fractured relationship? And how will this drama unfold for ordinary citizens caught in the crossfire? Let's explore the escalating tension between the US and Canada and the unexpected shifts it's creating in their economies and beyond. In response to these tariffs imposed by the US, Canada initially made it clear that retaliatory tariffs would remain in place until the US made a permanent pause. At first, this was just a threat, but soon the situation escalated, and Canada's frustration exploded in a wave of economic resistance that rippled through every corner of the country. Local businesses, from small pizzerias to major corporations, took matters into their own hands. For example, Graham's Pizza in Toronto swapped American-made ingredients like tomatoes from California and pepperoni from Ohio for locally sourced Canadian meats and Italian tomatoes. Even grocery stores and liquor retailers started rethinking their reliance on American imports. The shift didn't stop there. Canadians began choosing to boycott American goods in favor of local or European alternatives. People who once shopped frequently across the border now decided to spend their money within Canada, supporting local businesses instead. This wasn't just a protest, it was about identity. Canada, once known for its polite diplomacy, suddenly found itself in a culture war with its closest neighbor. The country had always been deeply intertwined with the US, but this tariff dispute made many Canadians feel as though they were being treated as a disposable economic partner. Everyday life felt the effects. Ordinary citizens noticed the rising prices of goods and began feeling the pressure on their wallets. Grocery shopping became a balancing act of trying to avoid US products, and small businesses struggled to keep up with the changes. But for many, it was also about a sense of national pride, with businesses and consumers alike rallying behind Canadian products. Politically, the tariffs had a unifying effect. The political landscape in Canada had been quite turbulent before the tariffs, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's approval ratings plummeting and questions about his leadership rising. His party was vulnerable heading into the next election. But then, the tariffs hit, and Canadians united against what they perceived as an economic attack from the US. Support for the Liberal Party surged, and even the opposition began adjusting its messaging, shifting focus from internal issues to protecting Canada from external threats. The Canadian flag, which had previously been associated with controversy due to the Freedom Convoy movement, was reclaimed as a symbol of national pride and resistance. On the ground, sports fans were leading the charge. At hockey games, crowds started to boo the US. National anthem and tensions between the two countries even spilled over into the rink, with players throwing punches during games. These displays of anger showed how far the situation had gone, turning a political issue into a cultural phenomenon. The tensions also affected tourism, with many Canadians canceling their trips to the US, particularly to Florida, California, and New York. The travel industry felt a noticeable downturn. At the heart of this entire situation was the realization that Canada had been far too dependent on the US for its economic stability. The tariffs served as a wake-up call to Canadians, forcing businesses and consumers to reevaluate their reliance on American imports. It wasn't just about the short-term effects. there were long-term political and economic consequences. The question many began asking was, why should we be so reliant on the US? Canada began looking beyond its southern neighbor for new trade partners, particularly focusing on Europe and Asia. The trade deal with the European Union, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement (CETA), gave Canadian businesses preferential access to European markets. As the US moved toward protectionism, Europe became an increasingly attractive alternative for Canadian exports. On the energy front, Canada started shifting its energy exports away from the US. By expanding the Trans Mountain Pipeline, Canada was able to direct more of its oil exports to Asia, particularly to countries like Japan and South Korea. This move helped Canada diversify its energy partnerships and reduce its reliance on the US. As its primary energy customer, for everyday Canadians, this meant a future where the cost of energy and resources might become more stable as they look to diversify their trade relationships. Instead of relying on one partner, Canada was expanding its reach, and this shift would have a lasting impact on the average consumer's experience. One of the most striking effects of this shift was on the energy sector. Canada has long been the largest supplier of crude oil to the US, but with Trump's tariffs, Canada is looking elsewhere for more stable markets. In particular, Canada's increased energy exports to Europe and Asia are changing the dynamic. The US has always depended on Canadian oil, but now Canada is positioning itself as a global energy supplier. Rather than just an American backup, liquefied natural gas (LNG) projects are being fast-tracked along Canada's east and west coasts, and the demand from European countries, particularly after the war in Ukraine, has created a need for stable, non-Russian energy sources. This is something Canada is eager to fulfill. For everyday life, this shift means that the price and availability of energy resources, like oil, gas, and electricity, may no longer be tied so closely to US demands. Canadians are taking control of their energy future and seeking more diverse markets to ensure long-term stability. It could also mean lower energy costs in some cases as global competition increases. The broader strategy for Canada's economic future is clear: diversify, diversify, diversify. Canada is no longer just an extension of the US economy. It is carving out its own place on the global stage, building stronger trade relationships with Europe, Asia, and beyond. The EU is playing a central role in Canada's trade diversification strategy. CETA, while not fully ratified across all EU states, has already led to a noticeable increase in trade between Canada and the EU. Canada's food, manufactured goods, and technology exports are now benefiting from preferential access to one of the world's largest economies. The growing trade relationships with Asia are also gaining momentum, particularly in the sectors of technology, manufacturing, and agriculture. As the US becomes more protectionist, Canada is seizing this opportunity to develop deeper, more stable partnerships with countries like Japan and South Korea. For ordinary Canadians, this shift could lead to more economic opportunities. As Canadian businesses expand into European and Asian markets, there will be greater job growth and new sectors for Canadian workers. This diversification not only reduces vulnerability to US policy changes, but also opens up new opportunities for Canadian consumers to access products and services from around the world. While the US may have forced Canada's hand in the short term, the long-term effects of this shift are clear. Canada is no longer simply a partner to the US. It is carving out a future where it is independent and resilient, positioning itself as a key player on the global stage. The days of Canada relying solely on the US are over, and while this may have started as a response to Trump's tariffs, it's becoming much more than that. It's a geopolitical realignment. The US may soon find itself on the outside looking in, as Canada diversifies its trade partnerships and secures a more independent future. For everyday Canadians, this could mean a more stable economy, with new opportunities for businesses and consumers alike. The decisions Canada is making today will shape the country's future for generations to come. What this means is that Canada's economy is changing, and it's changing for the better. The next few years will be critical in determining whether this shift is permanent or just a reaction to a specific political situation. But one thing is certain, Canada is no longer a passive partner in the global economic landscape. It is asserting its place and ensuring it has multiple paths to success. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth content on global economics and how international policies shape our everyday lives. Politically sensitive products to put pressure on key U.S. states. Tariffs are also expected to heavily impact manufacturers. Goods like construction equipment, furniture, and home appliances are common imports from Canada. These industries rely on seamless cross-border flows of materials and machinery. For instance, a 25% tariff on Canadian machinery imports could result in a rise in production costs for U.S. manufacturers. Canadian businesses, especially those that rely on U.S. components, might struggle to absorb these additional costs, potentially resulting in layoffs or plant shutdowns. One of the most important commodities affected by this trade war is energy. The U.S. imports a significant amount of its energy from Canada, particularly oil and natural gas. Canada is the U.S.'s largest foreign supplier of crude oil, making up about 60% of U.S. crude imports. A 10% tariff on Canadian crude could increase gasoline prices by up to $0.20 to $0.40 per gallon. This could further inflate transportation costs, raising the price of goods and services across the economy. For consumers, it could mean paying more to fill up your car or higher energy bills at home. The economic impact of these tariffs varies region by region. States like Texas, Michigan, and North Dakota are especially vulnerable because they rely heavily on cross-border trade with Canada. For example, North Dakota sends 70% of its exports to Canada, making it the state most exposed to changes in this trade relationship. In contrast, states with less trade dependency, like California or Florida, will feel a less direct effect. While higher prices will hit consumers, the manufacturing sector will also feel the strain. Job losses in industries that rely on cheap imported materials are already being predicted. It's expected that 2.5% of Canadian GDP will be lost in the first year due to these tariffs, resulting in job cuts, reduced working hours, and factory slowdowns. In the U.S., companies that heavily rely on Canadian imports will face similar struggles, especially in sectors like automotive production and agriculture. The U.S.-Canada trade tensions also have significant currency implications. The Canadian dollar could weaken significantly as the trade balance shifts and demand for Canadian exports decreases. This could affect everything from tourism to international investments in Canadian businesses. Moreover, higher tariffs on machinery imports are likely to deter new investments, especially in manufacturing plants that require high-end equipment. The overall slowdown in trade could stunt both business expansion and job growth across both countries. While these tariffs might initially seem like an attempt to protect domestic industries, the broader consequences could be disastrous. Canada's energy, manufacturing, and agriculture sectors will bear the brunt of the economic slowdown. On the other hand, U.S. consumers will face higher prices, which could lead to reduced spending and weaker consumer confidence. Over time, both countries will need to restructure their trade networks and potentially seek alternative suppliers to reduce dependency on each other. But for now, the immediate fallout will hurt both economies and impact everyday lives in ways that will only become clearer as time progresses. As these tariff impacts unfold, consumers can expect higher costs for everything from basic household items to luxury goods. One potential strategy is to buy Canadian-made goods that are still relatively unaffected by the tariffs. Shifting to local suppliers could help reduce the impact of the rising costs of imported products. Additionally, monitoring price trends and adjusting household budgets to accommodate price increases on certain goods will be key. In summary, the U.S.-Canada trade war has far-reaching consequences that affect nearly every sector of the economy. Tariffs on Canadian goods and energy imports will push up prices for consumers and disrupt manufacturing on both sides of the border. The most vulnerable industries will face serious challenges, from automotive parts to energy. While these shifts might create some new economic opportunities, the immediate effects on your daily life will likely involve higher costs and changes in the availability of certain products. Remember, while these changes seem inevitable, it's crucial to stay informed and adapt your spending habits to avoid financial strain. Make sure to like and subscribe for more in-depth analyses of these ongoing economic changes. Let us know in the comments how you think these tariffs will affect you personally and what steps you're taking to prepare.